With the 10th anniversary of 9/11 just 1 week away, we wanted to get a report card on national security. Joining me here in Washington, Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Joe Lieberman and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It's I don't know, it's not an auspicious anniversary, is it? It's a bit of a scary one, but what I wanted to ask you first is, we hear no specific credible threats. Do you both feel reasonably sure that we are safe on this, particularly in New York and Washington, on this anniversary?
I believe we're safer, but there are still plenty of folks that get up every single morning with the sole intention of planning, conducting, financing an operation against the United States of America. So it's something we have to be vigilant of, but I do believe with all the action taken over the last 10 years, we're safer, but not out of the,
I agree. I mean, part of this anniversary, I think, is to look back. And I think if you look back, the American people and the American government have a lot to feel proud about. We really transformed ourselves to meet the new threat of Islamist terrorism. I don't think anybody on September 12, 2001 would have predicted that in the following 10 years there would not be another major terrorist attack on our homeland, and there has not been. Also, our enemies have secured no major gains in their worldwide effort to attack us and enemies throughout the world, including the Muslim world. They're still out there. We're still in a war. Tragically, it's going to go on for a while, but we're a lot safer and stronger than we were 10 years ago.
Having said that, the two chairmen of the 9/11 Commission issued their own report card saying, okay, here's our recommendations that we put out in 2004, and here's where we're falling short. Remarkably to me, one of them is that there is not a reliable mechanism for detecting bombs aboard airline passengers. We had this entire discussion about how you could see everything in these new machines, and now, according to this report, they're not that reliable for detecting bombs. How is that possible?
Well, I'm not exactly sure everything that they looked at, but you have to remember the enemy gets up every day, takes a look at our security changes, and then adapts. That's what makes al-Qaeda so incredibly dangerous. And they recruit people to their ranks, and they still do that today, even though we've hit them pretty hard, that want to re-engineer ways that they can get bombs on aircraft. And it's a dynamic process. I don't think you're going to see one solution at the TSA station that's going to do it. It's going to be a combination of things that get us to a safer place and allow you to get on the airplane with some sense of relief.
And the other thing, Senator, that I found jaw-dropping is that 10 years after 9/11, police and firemen and medical personnel and emergency rescue workers during an emergency cannot talk to one another because the broadband width hasn't been approved. It is 10 years after. I was told by Governor Kane, former Governor Kane, who was one of those commissioners, that people died in Katrina because we didn't have that broadband width that they could all talk to each other on, that the policemen saw the Twin Towers wavering. They thought it was unstable, but they couldn't tell the firemen inside to get out because they're not on the same road. And I find it, I think most people would find it inexcusable.
Yeah, I agree. And those are realities that you've just described. But the truth is, interoperability of communications, the ability of first responders to talk to each other in a crisis are much better than they were 10 years ago.
But how come there's not this...
We have spent hundreds of millions of dollars of federal grants to states and localities making that possible. What they don't have, and this is what legislation that I and others are co-sponsoring would do, and it ought to pass in this Congress, is enough of the spectrum. We want to give them the so-called D-block spectrum so that they can have the same ability to transmit video, maps, etc., that most teenagers have on their cell phones. And until we do, we will not have learned the lesson. But I do want to say, first, hats off to Tom Kean and Lee Hamilton, who headed the 9/11 Commission. Congress adopted most of what they recommended. Most significant reform of the American intelligence community since the end of the Second World War, creation of the Department of Homeland Security. We're safer because our government is better organized to meet the terrorist threat. But there's still work to be done, and that's why this report this week is so important.
Were either one of you disturbed when there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C., and cell phone service was unreliable? It seems like every time a major thing happens, the first thing to go is your ability to make a phone call.
Right. Well, I mean, that is always a challenge. And remember,
Should it be?
Well, you have to remember the burden that we put on those systems today is exponentially larger than it even was 10 years ago. So we are struggling to keep up with that. It didn't go out for long, and the emergency communication network, the folks that had the absolute top priority to communicate could communicate, and that's the most important sector where you ought to focus. And then we need to try to get the civilian side of the communication network up to date so that when this particular thing happens, if it's a hurricane, a natural disaster, or a man-made event, that you don't have long-term service that goes out.
Let me put the two of you on pause because we're going to take a quick break. But up next, we will turn to the situations in Syria and Libya and the stakes for the U.S. We're back with Senate Homeland Security Committee Chairman Joe Lieberman and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers. Let me ask one sort of final wrap-up 9/11 question. That is, al-Qaeda, we've spent 10 years diminishing their capabilities. Are they now less of a threat than the lone wolf, as we call them? Just somebody who kind of shares the ideology but is hard to track because he's just a crazy person on his own.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. They are down. We have hurt them with the number 2 just getting taken out just recently. It had a tremendous impact. Tia was his name. It was tremendous impact on their organization. He was such an operational guy. But they're down, but not out. And it's a combination of both. Those lone wolves are part of their strategy to recruit in places like Western Europe and the United States. So even though they may act independent of a structured operation, they are still part of al-Qaeda mission statements and organizational operation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. We have definitely weakened al-Qaeda. They have not achieved any of their major goals. Bin Laden has been killed. But I think it's very important for us to understand that the enemy that we face in this war on terrorism is not a particular group, al-Qaeda. It is an ideology, a violent ideology of what I call Islamist extremism. It's not Islam. It's a small group who have perverted a religion. And it appears in a lot of different names in a lot of different places, and sometimes through lone wolves here in the United States. And that's why, unfortunately, this particular unconventional war is going to go on for a while.
Let me ask you, turn to Libya here, where we still haven't, Gaddafi's gone, but still there. He's not in power, but he's someplace in Libya, everyone believes. Let me ask you what is best for the future of the Libyan people, as honestly as you can answer this. Would it be better if he was captured and tried, or better if he just ran into some people who killed him?
Well, I think that's clearly up to the Libyan people. The most important phase of this, I believe, is now it's the Where's Waldo event of trying to find Muammar Gaddafi. They will succeed in that eventually. But the next several weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, is important for their establishment of governance and trying to avoid an insurgency. And it has a lot of components to it: the weapons systems, the weapons cache, their ability to get resources in the short term, their own resources, engaged in government development so they can take control and show the Libyan people that the rebels can govern. All of that is important, and their work not to make the same kind of mistakes that were made in Iraq about dismissing all of their military and their intelligence apparatus. They need to co-opt some of that in the next few weeks. If a combination of all of those things happen, then it's probably of little consequence which route, which thing happens to Muammar Gaddafi.
Let me ask you a question. I talked to a former top official in the intelligence community who said, I'm not that worried about the mustard gas because there's not any sign at all that he could deliver anything with mustard gas. What worried this official were those shoulder-launched missiles. And he said, one terrorist gets one of those, he can bring down a plane, period, end of story. And there are hundreds of them. What do you know about the whereabouts? Are we trying to track that in any way?
We're tracking that very carefully, and we're working with the new government of Libya, which is, I would say, Western-oriented. They're nationalistic, but they're, of course, grateful to NATO because they know without NATO, including the U.S., they would not have overthrown Gaddafi. They were the boots on the ground, but we were their allies and supporters. And we're working with them to try to secure both the mustard gas and the munitions that I worry would fall otherwise into the hand enemies of the U.S., including terrorists. But it's very important to say here that one of the bonuses, believe it or not, of the Iraq War was that Gaddafi got scared he would be next, and he came in from the cold, as it were, and agreed to get rid of a lot of highly enriched uranium and other weapons of mass destruction that he had. So there's fortunately less for us to protect now than there would have been.
And again, my concern has been, again, that's what the next few weeks is important. What are we doing to secure those weapon systems?
What are we doing?
Well, we have a very unique capability in the United States, and we've got to shake ourselves out of this notion that NATO is going to do it all or the TNC is going to do it all.
We're not as involved as you'd like us to be.
I would like us to be more involved. And I'm not talking about boots on the ground or big military. We need to use our special capabilities that really only the United States has to secure, account for those weapons, and render them safe. And we need to do it now. I will tell you, Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations identified by the state are very interested in getting their hands on those missile systems, other weapons, even the chemical stockpile precursors. All of that we know is happening. The race is on. This is a race we should win. We shouldn't debate if we need to have special capabilities on the ground there to take care of that particular problem.
And the fact is, it's sort of chaotic there, and inside chaos, you can grab a lot. I have to end there.
And the black market. You do worry about that stuff getting legs.
No, that's always the danger. Again, I'd say that the new Libyan government is moving to create stability. Very important for us to help them get Gaddafi, and then to encourage them to create a government that doesn't punish everybody who was on the other side, but creates unity. There are tough days ahead, but what they've done is a tremendous victory in getting rid of Gaddafi, and it's very important throughout the Arab world.
Senator Joe Lieberman, Congressman Mike Rogers, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day.